Hey, it's the Figure Hunter here with a review for the Amazon Halo Band. So right there, this whole channel is dedicated to tracking and testing devices for CrossFit and high intensity interval training. And one of the things unique about this, where it's not sort of typically in that category, is the recovery and wellness and the mind-body balance and the meditation or mobility that ties into an intense training regimen that's important and value add in that specific aspect. So this might be slightly a diversion, but I feel like it's a worthwhile device to look at and to talk about. So we're going to get into looking at the device itself very briefly, but mostly the app, because that's where all the content is stored. We're going to compare it to Whoop and to Fitbit because of some of the direct comparisons there. But as always, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing for more. Hoping to get my hands on the Polar Verity Sense to be able to test that, as well as I want to do an analytical analysis of the OH1 Plus Polar strap to see how it compares to a chest strap. And the hope is that I think there's rumors of Garmin releasing a watch, and I'm going to be there just to immediately get that for testing as well. So a lot of good content coming forward. So let's get into the Halo. What is the Halo? So we are going to look at all the primary pieces of value it adds, and we're going to look at it on the app itself because that's where all the information lives, and that's where you're going to get your benefit from it. We're going to look at this very briefly. Okay, so let's look at the band, just the specifics of it. So you have a one-button press. All this does is turn the microphone on and off. Both of these are LED lights, and both of those, I think, are microphones. If you look at the back of it, it looks exactly like a Fitbit Charge 2. There's typically only one green diode in the middle, and there it goes. And don't know what those other sensors are for. And it's got a really interesting, it's super easy to pop off and super easy to change, and I haven't noticed any kind of issues with it, not staying on or feeling like it's going to shake off or something like that. But it just snaps off, and you can change it to a sport mode or another, type of mode. When I actually put it on my bicep for tracking, actually I'll just stretch it out all the way to the end, and then allow that to be, where it, connects so that I can get a tighter feel. There's nothing else really in the box. This is how it connects. So you can it goes button out. You can see the curvature there compared to the curvature there. And you just clasp it in. It basically finds its own little footing. But that's exactly what the basics of the look and feel. The band is super comfortable. It's not, if you pull it that way, it will pop off. It's not the most stretchy, but it's slightly stretchy. So I feel like it's fine. It's probably more narrow. Let me see if I have one more narrow than a Charge 2, if you're familiar with that. So there's like a Charge 2. It's really similar in width, but just slightly more narrow than a Charge 2. So that is the band up front. But what are the primary pieces? It does sleep tracking, body scan, tone of your voice, and activity tracking. And coupled with it, there's content. So there's a lot of content-related features and benefits that are part of the main package offering. It's not just a device that tracks what you're doing, but it provides content so you can engage in other things. And there's a lot of movement in that direction with a lot of companies out there. So when you look at just some of the simple specifics, I tested the battery, so I don't even know what the specs are for the battery life. If you have the tone tracking on and you have it listening for your voice at all times, it's getting about 2 days of battery life, about 48 hours almost exactly, and then it takes about an hour to charge to 100%. Side note feature is that when it is fully charged, your phone will get a message saying it's fully charged. All these other devices, you have no idea when it's fully charged. You can get it back on your wrist. So anyway, small tidbit. It also tell your phone to tell you when it's running out of battery life. This costs $100 right now, so it's $99 for the device itself, and then you get 6 months of the content or subscription, much like the Fitbit plan, much like if you subscribe to an exercise plan where they're giving you exercise content. And then after the 6 months, it's only $4 a month. So super low cost of entry, and we'll look at what the content is it provides. So on average, it's going to cost you $48 a year. You can compare that more directly with Fitbit, where the device is more expensive and you're paying $10 a month or $120 a year, or the Whoop, where the device is free but you're paying $30 a month, $360 a year. So a lot more expensive there over time. So let's get into each of the primary aspects, one aspect at a time. So the first thing we're going to look at is sleep. Okay, so this is the main landing page for all the primary content that Halo provides for the app. The 4 primary areas: activity, sleep, tone, and body scan. summary of tidbits, and then the content features on the bottom. We're going to go into each of those individually. So let's look at the sleep aspect. So it does a great job of looking at the 4 major stages of sleep: awake, REM, light, and deep, and giving you a sleep score. I really like the sleep score. So if you compare it to like Fitbit was always like giving me high scores. Like this would have been 85%. But I feel like it does a good job gauging truthful scores, which I'll show you in a second. It shows you the amount of time in your sleep stagings down below, and you can click into these features and learn about them. It really does have a lot of educational content on the benefits or aspects of each subset of the things that this, Halo band focuses on. And then the other unique feature is it'll tell you if you were plus or minus your average temperature. I don't know that there's any value in sleep temperature variance, but this will give it to you just like the Fitbit Sense does, but obviously it's just at a lot lower cost of an instrument. And then you can see how it compares to other devices. So like this is last night. It overshot it a little bit, giving me a 70 compared to, let's say, Garmin. So this is the Garmin Motion, and you can see the time in deep. You can also see just the picture flow of the night's sleep was somewhat similar to the picture flow of the night's sleep here, missing some of the REM stages, or at least providing differences. And then if you were to look at the previous night, where it gave me a fair score of 61, and then you were to compare that to that same night, like on a Polar, this is how Polar would look, which gave me a 61. From a scoring perspective, so last night on the Garmin Fenix 6, and you can only get this sleep score on the Fenix 6 line currently, and you get the sleep score only on the widget on the watch, but it gave me a score of 63 versus 70. But the previous night it was like 61 for Garmin, 61 for the Halo, and then obviously nope, and obviously wait for it, 61 for the sleep on the Polar. So that's the sleep aspect. Let's talk about it together. Okay, so what do we see with the sleep? I think it does an awesome job. I think the primary fact that it's following and tracking the real quality of the sleep. When I had a long night, there's a night where, because I typically get 5-6 hours of sleep. There's a night where I got like 8.5 hours, and it just gave me like a 95. Almost all the other devices don't score that high because they're basing it on the percentage of time you were asleep versus awake, or the percentage of your deep relative to the total amount of all the rest of sleep. But if you get 8.5, 9 hours, it should just say like, unless you had some real restlessness, it should be a high score. And then when the nights when I got terrible sleep, it gave me terrible scores. So it's really effective sleep tracking. I think, if you compare this to like Fitbit, which I always felt like I got elevated scores, like it just never said you really need to recover, even if I got like a 5-hour night of sleep. And Apple, which was just super generic information, like it didn't give you deep REM. So it is a really good and useful for sleep tracking, in my opinion. And plus some of the content features we're going to talk about later, I think are super useful or interesting or neat when looking at sleep aspects. So let's look next at the activity tracker. Okay, so this is the activity landing page. Obviously, you just go in through the main 4 quadrants of information. It gives you basic points. So this might correlate to the PIA score that you get on like the Amazfit watches, or some of the sort of more Asian-based watch manufacturers. But it's just based on how much overall activity. It to me is more useful than steps or stairs in particular. So it will categorize like how much time you spent, and this is a weekly snapshot. And if you see right in the middle right where it says today, and that's total points today, you can click into that, and that's where you'll see your steps for the day, as well as how many points you've specifically accumulated today and what ranges and zones. And one thing that's really interesting about this activity tracking is they give you a detraction for sedentary moments. So like I worked a lot yesterday, and so I only had a -6 points for being overly sedentary, so sitting around for too long. And you can see just the tracking features. So if you wear the band on your wrist and you're doing a CrossFit style workout, unfortunately you're going to get worse results as far as activity goes. So like this is the 6 a.m. class. It just categorized it as like a 39-minute walk. So way off the mark. Not worthwhile to track the activity. You don't actually start the activity yourself. You actually just wear the watch, and it'll wear the device and it'll pick it up. And you can see your heart rate over time, so it does give a continual heart rate and as well as the resting heart rate. But I found that if you open the band up, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, and you wear it on your forearm, you actually get a lot better tracking. So here it's now giving me at least relative reasonable points. So if you were doing CrossFit and this was sort of a supplemental device you were using, you want to wear it higher up on your arm. And I just did that by opening the band completely up and putting it on my forearm. So the flow of the workout actually looked like this. The heart rate is still way below what it was, and the average heart rate down below was way below what it was, but at least it's giving me relatively the appropriate amount of points. And same thing for the workout today. I got 44 points, but it just tracks, and that's actually on point with like the point in the workout that was the most strenuous, so at least it's in generally. But that's just how the activity works. So that's your daily snapshot, and you can go back to the week in the main landing area. So just sort of summarizes it, tells you which days you were most active. But I think in general, it's worthwhile just to see how it detracts your score, and it just gives you an overall glance at a week at a glance rather than just step tracking. So somewhat reasonable. Let's come together again and talk. Okay, so what do we think about activity tracking? In general, I think it's a good concept. This is absolutely not a device to track your workouts. It will not track them. You can't push the start button and a stop button. It's just not there. Not at all for that. It's for overall health and wellness. So this just sort of keeps a general idea. But one of the things I've always liked about the Polar line of watches is that they do activity tracking, like just how active you were that day. And there's usually a goal, and I think it's worthwhile to have just sort of a general snapshot. And so, versus how many stairs or how many steps you went. So it has some of that information in there, but I do like that it's tracking your general activity, and that it's detracting if you're overly sedentary. So the heart rate measurement, as we can see in that aspect, was totally off. But I do think that it's actually tracking in general a useful piece of information just for overall health and wellness for how active you are. Let's look next at the body scan. Okay, so this is the body scan. I'm not going to show you the picture of the body scan. It's just me in my underwear, so my apologies for leaving out that content. But so this is just how you do it. You basically you find
change
a well-lit
into
room,
minimal clothes,
you change, and you put your hair back, and you set up your
now we'll fine-tune
device
things.
and sort of keep it straight, and it'll help you to figure that out. And then it'll just have you stand in multiple positions, and it'll give you a readout. So my apologies again, some of this is going to be a little bit limited in what you can see, but there's a lot of videos online to be able to see it. But it talks about the scan being a lot more accurate, and this, we'll talk about in a second compared to a scale. You can set up reminders to scan. You have the contents related to scan, and it does one thing that's neat is you can see your development in a hypothetical, like if you were to balloon up. But if you're in the middle at some point and you want to see what it would look like if you trim up from where you are, it'll give you a scan of how that might look to do so. But there's just a lot of good content around the scan, and it does give you a visible representation for how you can see your own progress, and which I think is helpful motivator. So in general, I think I couldn't show like exactly all the content, or don't want to show exactly all the content because I'm not summer ready. But either way, I didn't want to show all the content, but I think in general it's a great idea because I can seeing a scan of myself and being able to range the zone and see what different versions of myself could be. It's motivating, but the biggest thing to motivate is just to see if you can get your numbers to go down or get your body shape to look differently on the scan, and that it is a more worthwhile than a scale. So I've used the Garmin, traditional scale, whatever the first version of the scale was, and I don't think it's accurate. I don't think it's accurate at all with tracking changes, with tracking muscle development, tracking body fat development. All it does is it tracks my weight. I don't think the hydration measures, I don't think any of that stuff is really worthwhile information because I don't think it follows diet programs or, when I've been tracking macros and not. But this actually does a better job, and I think it's been statistically proven to do a better job. And obviously, when you're taking pictures of yourself, or even if on the tone aspect, you can have it delete that information on the tone recordings. And I'll share this in a second. It deletes it as soon as it goes, and it provides the analysis and sends the analysis back. It deletes from the server or whatever. But I do think it's useful to see the picture and to have a tracking and have the scan more accurate, as well as useful for motivating you to want to improve. So motivate for change. So let's talk about that tone aspect. So the last aspect is tone, and I've turned this off because I've been tracking the battery life when not using tone. So tone cuts if it's tracking your voice at all times, it cuts the battery life in half. So let's just go to a couple of days where you could see it. It gives, it may be useful information if you're in sales or you're communicating with people on a regular basis over the phone or directly. It is useful, and you can do a recording. So it'll capture noteworthy moments where your voice had more solid inflection to it, or more solid sense to it, or emotion behind it, to tell you when you're neutral for most of the time. And it just helps you, like it says there, to see how other people may hear you. And you can do a live recording conversation, like so that bottom, see on the bottom main tile that says live at the bottom of the screen now, you tap that and it'll start recording everything. So if you had the tone, you would start this, and it would start to listen to see if it, what your basic, how it's perceiving your words. So if I go, ha, 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 that is awesome, it says amusingly, it said, wait a second, if I'm upset, I don't really like the way this is turning out. Well, it still puts me as happy and delighted. So again, maybe they still have a lot of work to do to be able to, if I can talk sad, I don't know. I just don't feel like it's very worthwhile. Nope, doesn't work. But either way, delete summary, yes, delete. But either way, it's a starting point for starting to perceive or hear how other people may perceive you, and just an interesting thing. Okay, so the tone aspect, you can see that it did not quite pick up, and that was just a random test on this video. I've seen other videos where they tested the live tracking, and it can seem to get relatively accurate, but it's just more of an interesting idea. But it can show you how your mood may look throughout the day or sound throughout the day, which is helpful for you to be able to evaluate how are you really feeling. And secondly, if you are in sales, you're talking to people, if you're communicating as your primary source of interaction with people in your job, it can help you learn more about how you may sound to other people outside. And then obviously with your communication with family, if you can have greater insight there, but it's just an interesting concept. So I don't know how they're going to develop it and evolve it. It's just in its interesting concept form now, and it takes about twice the battery life, or cuts the battery life in half. So we'll see how they develop it for now. But as far as an overall sort of more holistic approach to wellness, it's an interesting ad. So let's talk last about the content piece, because I feel like that's an important part. The last aspect is the content side. And this is where I think this actually has a lot of value. So up till now, the sleep score and the depth of information for sleep is really good. This activity score is conceptually generally good for just your overall activity outside of really analyzing a workout, which you'd want to use a different device. The tone is really neat, and the body scan actually helps you set progress goals. But the thing that is actually really impressive is the amount of content. So at the bottom, you have featured programs, whether it's healthy habits, moving, getting ready to sweat. But then you go down to the bottom of the 4 primary icons, you hit discover, and this is where you can see each of the content pieces. And I've tried a bunch of these, and I feel like they're fantastic. I mean, partially because they rely on third-party providers, so they don't have to write all this content themselves. They just say, hey, if you want to write this, we'll put it on there if it's worthwhile. But you go in and you can, hear and see certain things. So you say get started. It'll ask you, if this is like a sleep thing, it'll ask you if you want a reminder to start listening to sleep-focused music. And you start the program, and it'll say, got it. You can listen to different things. I don't know if this sound will come through, but it plays, calming chimes and calming music. You can have it, let's just focus on the sleep aspect. We'll focus on each aspect really quick. So, there's progressive muscle relaxation where it'll walk you through that, just calming music. There's a few things, listening to the sounds, smoothing sounds of water. And if you wanted to cancel something, because you can only have 5 programs going at the same time, you just cancel and it's going. They'll read you a story. They'll have different, like this binaural beats, which is supposed to help some part of your brain. You can do activity-based ones. So I've done the stretching and the yoga-based ones, just like, tidbit stretches. It's really helpful in basic ways. You can take a mood break or a work break. And it's just silly little things, but you actually, because it's written by different content providers, you can sort of explore around and see if there's something you really like. You can go to your personal icon and see what you have in progress. That's the isotonic tones. And if you're tracking it, it'll actually give you what you're tracking. So let's talk. Okay, so the content, what do we see about that? They have a great amount of content. And you think about it relative to some of the other content providers. I mean, there is content out there that's for free, for sure, but Fitbit, $10 a month, Apple Plus, or Fit Plus, or whatever it is on the Apple platform, I think it's $10 a month for content being provided. And it doesn't even necessarily go into like tones for sleep or calming sleep or mental relaxation, read me a story before bedtime. So there's so much content out there that I started playing around with it. I listened to a bunch of different tones before bed and listened to soft music and, the storytelling, as well as did a stretching video. And that's really good for mobility, some basic aspects that we could work on better in the CrossFit and high intensity interval community, the yoga aspect. But for $4 a month to get a variance, not just of fitness related content that's provided by a third party provider. So they can bring on a third party provider. They don't have to write their own script. They can just have somebody else do it, as well as some of the other health and wellness features for sleep or for relaxation or for calming and meditation. Those are all super useful and interesting concept, but not just interesting, useful information. So lots of content out there. So in final, what do I think of the Halo? I think in general, it is a great device and a great idea. I think the fact that it can accurately give you analytical information as well as more holistic information for health and wellness, I feel like is useful in today's world. It won't track your workout, so it is not for that, but I feel like it does a great job. And that's where I would compare it to the Fitbit Sense, the Apple Watch, and the Whoop. I honestly feel like in those three categories, they will not really do a great job tracking your workout. So the Apple Watch 6 has the best heart rate tracker on the market built into it, but it doesn't give you analytical stats. You have to go search for it for third parties. The Whoop has a very interesting concept, but you only have the optical heart rate tracker, which we've proven to be faulty unless you maybe wear it on the bicep, and it won't allow you to connect to a chest strap. So the workout analysis part is not reliable, and a lot of reviewers have found the Whoop band to have inaccurate optical heart rate tracking when it comes to intense CrossFit type workouts. So it's a bust there. So again, you're only using it for the health and wellness if you're a Whoop owner. Same thing with the Apple Watch owner. In general, using it only for health and wellness because it doesn't give deep workout analytics. And the same thing for Fitbit. No deep workout analytics. You're only using it for health and wellness. So this is a band that's smaller, lighter, cheaper, has more content provided, and it provides the same health and wellness in general as all these other devices do. So that's how I compare it. Is I just think this is great. This is something that you could just use to be able to track these basic tenets and these basic aspects, especially if you're on a weight loss program or you're wanting just an easy feed of information. I just want to do some stretching for 10 minutes. There was like a 6-minute stretching video I did. Easy. You have there was a 2-minute start your day off with a light workout video. So I don't know how useful 2 minutes would be, but just to, different concepts, or if you just want to be a little bit spoon-fed because you don't want to have to go search for it, this provides all sorts of content across a big spectrum of things, and it can be a motivation if you want to reshape your body, get in better shape. So I would say great all around. The cost for $100, I think that's a reasonable price point because it's 6 months for free and then it's only $4 a month. Again, I feel like all of that is a relatively reasonable price point. So your total cost year one is $124 and then $48 year after. Yeah, that does, it's way below a lot of the devices on the market today. So in general, I feel like this is a great device. Thanks so much for watching the Fit Gear Hunter. Have a great day.